Welcome back to another episode of In Focus with Haversine Funding, the podcast where we discuss trends, insights, and strategies that drive success within specialty finance. I'm your host, Nolan Reichert. Today, we are diving into a topic that has been talked about a lot lately, one of the forces that is currently shaking up specialty finance and banking, and that is artificial intelligence. We're going to discuss how it's shaking up and changing the ways that historically we have been doing things to start creating efficiencies and think a little bit outside of the box of ways that we can continue to evolve in the future. And to join me today, we have a new co-host, Eddie Munn, Haversine's very own. I like to call him the brains behind the operation, our controller.
Way too nice.
Eddie, thank you so much for joining us.
No, absolutely, and thank you for having me here because I've been seeing the view counts go up, and I'm like, man, when's my time to get on there? I don't know. So
we just hit 100,000. I think of as of mid-December, we were a little over 110,000. So thank you for all the viewers and listeners out there. Eddie, I definitely wanted to have him join me today because he is one of the minds behind trying to integrate internally at Haversine and start pushing AI. So he's very well versed in the topic. And our very special guest is also very well versed in this topic. He has been in specialty finance and factoring for over 20 years. That is Ryan Jaskiewicz, the president of structured finance at Climate First Bank. You guys are a mission-driven bank that is at the forefront of integrating AI into all things from customer engagement to underwriting and operations. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself to give them background on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me. First, before we get started, I thought I did something wrong. I thought I offended you. I've seen how many guests you've had over the last couple of years, and I thought, geez, not for nothing. When's my invite? Kind of like Eddie over here. So thank you for having me on the successful and In Focus show here. So I've been in, like you said, specialty finance and factoring for 20 years. Started my own finance company in 2006-ish, 7 range. Exited that about 2 years ago. As you said, I'm now president of structured finance for Climate First Bank, which that's a nebulous term for a lot of places. For us, it's anything sort of non-traditional specialty finance related. Starting with factoring and asset-based lending. We've been going for about a year now. So I joined the bank in October of 2024. We really didn't start funding until January, and we've had quite the wild ride this year. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, we wanted to save you for our big episode of, we're past 100,000.
Nice save there. Save there.
And now you can get us to 500,000. This one's going to do numbers. So, it's a very hot topic. Mm-hmm. Every conference you go to, every event, it is touched on, and we've touched on it, a little bit on the podcast. But a lot of it is with individuals that are doing it within, their own kind of environment. And we haven't seen that transition to banks as much. So we thought it would be perfect, just curious to kind of start from the top. What led you to Climate First Bank? And then also to stack on top of that question, also to push the bank towards AI. You a lot of times see banks being slower and a little bit less progressive with those things. They might want to let them work themselves out before they start integrating it. So what kind of inspired that for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've had the opportunity now to build 2 finance companies effectively, right? This is a division within a bank, but I've had the opportunity to kind of do things from scratch. And so the technology I was working with in 2006 and 2007, a lot of it was cutting edge for that time, right? Mm-hmm. And I got to do a lot of interesting things that a lot of finance companies weren't doing because they had started prior, right? So I've always had this mindset of, if I'm going to start something, I need to first get a lay of the land of what the technology looks like and what I'm trying to optimize for. And so I kind of took that approach and said, all right, I have a blank slate now. I don't have to do it the way I did it at my other company. I don't have to use the same tools. I'm now not entrenched. You know how you get with software and technology, it gets so sticky that like trying to exit and move to something else is difficult. So I had the opportunity building out this organization from scratch to look at the technology. And obviously AI has been it's been the most popular topic over the last 2 years, I'd say. And
Absolutely.
I've always been a bit of an early adopter. And so I've been using it since it came out. Every couple months, it gets better and better and better. And so I feel like I have a good sense of what's going on. You know, I'm not an expert by any means. But I looked at it and I said, okay, if I'm building out a new division and I'm building out processes, procedures, workflows, and things like that, that's where I started. What are the workflows I'm going to implement? Like, they don't have to be the same thing I did before. So first it was kind of figuring out what those workflows were, and then taking the mindset of how do I apply automation and AI to these workflows before even building them. So I will admit I'm a little lucky in the fact that I understand it a good bit. I know enough about technology to be a little dangerous, and I'm starting from scratch. So I also understand that if somebody's listening to this and has had a finance company for 20 years, it's kind of hard to re-engineer things. And so we'll touch on that a little bit, but that's sort of what I looked at. I said, we could build a lean, automated, AI-first, AI-centric division to help factoring workflows, ABL workflows, underwriting, and do it with sort of, I want to say less people, but that's not necessarily the case. For me, it's more about elevating the people I have from doing manual grunt work that is prone to mistakes and prone to failures, and elevating them to the sort of more human-focused items, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, you know, being able to create this from scratch has really enabled you to, you know, identify areas that could use AI, right, to minimize mistakes or eliminate redundancies. And so, Ryan, what areas within structured finance, commercial lending, are you seeing like the most benefit by integrating AI into daily processes?
Yeah, so I get to see, being an executive at the bank, I get to see its workflows throughout the whole bank. But in terms of what the purpose of this show is, factoring asset-based lending, the main places I'm seeing it for ourselves, I can only speak for ourselves, is in our underwriting and our monitoring. So we've built out an underwriting platform. We use a tool called Airtable, but it could be really anything. Most of these have AI integrations with them, but we've built out an underwriting platform in Airtable that allows us to create AI field agents that do very, very specific jobs. And so one thing I want to touch on, I'm not sure if we were going to talk about it later, so I'll touch on it now, is that I do envision a day where you're going to be able to dump a bunch of documents into an AI chat and say, underwrite this, and it'll do it.
Yeah,
there is that day coming. It's not tomorrow, but it's also not far off. What it really does well right now is very, very specific tasks. Like we've all had to review 3 months of bank statements, right? We're looking for merchant cash advance companies. We're looking for large inflows, outflows. Well, we have a field agent within our underwriting that the minute we drop those documents in there, it's doing that specific task. We then multiply that into every single item in our checklist and have a field agent doing that one specific task. So it's very, very focused on just that and spits out the answer so that our true underwriters can come in and analyze those things and make decisions based on them. Does that answer the question?
No, definitely. I mean, it sounds like a massive enhancement tool, right? And so, you know, you're able to have, it's a multiplier effect where now you have 2 or 3 seasoned underwriters, you know, that are able to look and monitor and underwrite a lot more with less. I mean, less resource.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And you know, I love how you broke it down, because when a lot of individuals hear about AI, you know, they have one of a few reactions, and one of them is, this is scary. A field agent, what is that? You know, how does that, like, what? And then not only that, but those that are interested, it's like, well, where do I even start? And you touched on it earlier about the software integration. Even if we are talking about something as simple as accounting software or factoring software, just internal softwares that you're using, even the implementation of getting a new, even if it's better and fits your current needs, that transition is very scary. And most groups are hesitant because they say, how much productivity am I going to lose during that integration? Although it might speed it up after. So it's, a lot of people want to dip their toes in the water and they're just not really sure where to start. You've had the ability, from starting at your previous company to now to kind of test and get a little bit hands-on with these. So what are some of the most common misconceptions that you have? If I was, listening or watching this and interested or might know a little bit about it, but, not as well versed, like what are some misconceptions that you would want to tell people about?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception probably, you talked about it being scary, right? So people are fearful, managers are fearful, executives are fearful, rank and file folks, they're fearful of their jobs. I read a Wall Street Journal article a couple weeks ago that said AI started out saying AI is coming for our jobs, and it has shifted to, if you don't know AI, you're let go. Yeah. So it's really, that has been a mindset shift that I think people aren't understanding. Another way of saying it is that it at first started out like, that's cheating. And now it's, if you don't do it, you get dinged on your performance review. I know specifically at Climate First Bank, it's end of year, right? So we built out all of our next year's goals and objectives for each employee. And I can tell you, every single employee, we are tracking their usage of AI, making sure they're using it, not the other way around, making sure they're utilizing this tool to accelerate it. So I just wanted to touch on that, how the mindset has shifted. But a big misconception is that AI is making credit decisions, which it's not, at least not at responsible institutions. It's reducing risk through consistency, transparency, and sort of fatigue-free, I guess, analysis by your people. So the real risk isn't the fact that it's making these credit decisions on behalf of you. The risk is not using it to help you make those decisions. And that's one of the key misconceptions here. And I also think, and I'll let you guys jump in, but one of the biggest misconceptions is also you have to use it for everything. Yeah. We're lucky, again, started from scratch, built it in each specific place. We also work at a place that is very, very pro artificial intelligence. I think it helps that we have a subsidiary that's a bit of a fintech, and that person runs our technology and our head of IT and all that. And so we've all made a big push to say all in on things like Copilot. We're in banking. So what do banks use? They use Microsoft. Yep. And so what we're able to do is use something like Copilot and integrate it in every single area of our business. And I think that's one of the places that people don't realize that they can sort of get started. They know it's there, but if it's turned on for those employees, especially if you're in that world, that little Microsoft Copilot ribbon lives everywhere. And while us that use AI know that Copilot's not the greatest, it's better than nothing. And so its ability to focus yourself, to make writing emails easier, make summarizing documents easier, things like that, those are the real places to start. I think sometimes people go, oh, I need to create a brand new AI tool that underwrites everything and sells everything. And you don't have to do that. You have to start smaller.
Right. No, I mean, I love using, ChatGPT to get started on a memo, So, accounting documents, accounting memos in general, it's a great way to, start off, getting something put together, tweaking it, obviously making sure that, it's not pulling junk. So it helps save so much time that I think, for me, something that would take hours. I mean, you're able to kind of get something up to review at least, within an hour or so. So
I want to pull the thread on that a little bit. Another misconception is, and not a misconception, but 2 years ago, AI was very prone with errors. Okay. I think there's a perception that it's exactly the same way today, and I'm here to tell you it is wildly different. If you, Eddie, if you're using this to create accounting memos, I think you can agree the errors are far, far less than that. Now, again, you have to review things, you have to be on top of things, but I think there's a misconception in the world that this is prone to hallucinations and errors, which for a long time it was. It is accelerating in such a way. How do I say this? We've seen technologies of all sorts accelerate over time. The speed at which it's getting better, more accurate, and more useful is staggering, for lack of a better word.
No, it's mind-blowing. It's awesome. I mean, it's terrifying. I mean, you can just say everything all into one. It's like something that took me, years of studying for a CPA exam. This chat bot, is now able to do it with crazy accuracy. And I mean, yes, you're still having to go in there and make sure that it's not pulling junk again. But man, at the end of the day, if it gets 95% of the information that I need, and I'm able to fill in the rest and, tweak it for my needs, I mean, it's an amazing time saver. I mean,
there's some real world examples of in our space of like the idea of spreading financials. We've all done it. We've all had to write a credit memo or a credit write up and spread financials, right? I can drop any version of a company's financials and it will automatically spread it for me with the tool we have. Or we have an AI that reviews our borrowing bases as they come in from clients and flagging inconsistencies throughout that. I mean, these are all things that took a ton of manual time and are just sort of quickly becoming things we just don't have to do manually anymore. And so the last thing I'll say in terms of sort of misconceptions is choose a workflow, choose one and go, this is a workflow that takes me a lot of time. It's super manual, and just try to automate with automation tools and AI. Try that one workflow. Don't try to do everything at once.
No, it's funny. I try to automate and have, ChatGPT do pretty much start to finish work paper. It's like, that did not work out well. But yeah, when you give it something very specific to do, it's excellent. And so, no, I'm excited to see how that goes. And I guess, Ryan, leading into the next question here, it sounds to me like, what you've created in your department, it's more of, an enhancement in everything you guys do from start to finish, underwriting to funding. I guess, are you potentially seeing a day where it could, change up the entire process of underwriting in general, where, a potential client comes in and they're able to interact with AI and you guys are able to get it funded very quickly? I mean, do you guys kind of see that being the next iteration, maybe in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I'm thinking about it. I don't know. It depends. In certain instances, yes. I think there's I'll speak from the bank's perspective, right? Like, we've already automated a lot of our consumer lending. Why? Because it's very boxy. It's easy. These are plugged in. And we've used AI tools to accelerate that. So things like that, things that are cookie cutter, are definitely going to be automated with AI in a way that we're kind of not understanding now. But I also think that we sometimes overthink a lot of these things, where you think about technology. Every technology that has come out in history has said it's going to wipe out either humanity or jobs or all that. And guess what we always do? We always figure it out.
Yeah.
It always shifts. It creates new jobs. It creates new opportunities. It elevates people to new roles. So I think we're going to see a lot of, and my wife calls me too optimistic sometimes, but I think that's where we're headed before we're headed for anything where, and that's not your question you're asking, but before anything super duper negative. And we have, it could definitely go that route. No one's saying it can't go that route, but I definitely think it's going to be more enhancing the human. Now, I do think, though, that you are going to be able to train. I kind of mentioned it before. You're going to be able to train these chatbots and almost have conversations with them. Like, let's talk about underwriting. You're going to be able to have a conversation with an underwriting AI tool that is written for your credit policy It has all of history's knowledge relating to factoring and ABL, plus your credit policy, plus your processes and procedures. And you're going to be able to dump documents in there and have a conversation with it. And it's going to tell you things you weren't thinking of. It's going to go, have you thought about this? Have you thought about, I'm already seeing that, where like a risk flag that I didn't even think of, I'm like, wow, yeah, I guess that is a risk there.
That's
or
amazing.
An industry risk, right? Or like a current trend that I'm not tracking. A company comes to me for factoring or for ABL, and I don't know a lot about their business, and there's some negative trend happening. That's a flag I'm not going to, as a human, just get, right? So this is going to pull from current news, current trends, all those things. And so I do think that there's a world where that's coming. Is there a world soon where a client talks only with a chatbot, gets approved and gets funded? I don't think very soon. I think, and mainly that's going to be humans saying, whoa, pump the brakes. Because I'm an early adopter. I don't even feel super comfortable with that. And that can get off the rails pretty quick.
So I have another piece for you. You mentioned trends. We'll get on to some trends. But before we jump there, just curious, as you were speaking, it kind of made me think of something. So you guys are very AI driven. Use it in your day-to-day for efficiency and processes and workflows. And you mentioned that there's going to be a day where it is going to be so optimized that deals might get funded strictly, just by kind of plug and play. How will you balance? So as AI continues to progress, how do you balance hiring people that are qualified to do things that you guys are now pushing off to AI versus bringing in people that are qualified using AI versus ABL factoring or banking? Like, how do you view that?
It's, yeah, that is, I'm pausing here.
Stuff.
That is a concern. Yes. I said before that it was all about AIs coming for our jobs, and you'd be silly not to admit that a lot of white collar work is going to go away. I have an 8.5-year-old. I was joking with my wife last night that I'm going to ask him to become a plumber or an electrician someday, because by the time he's there, that's going to be the valuable work. Now, that said, currently, as I think of hiring, as an entire bank, we discussed, even at the nascent stage of AI and what it is now, our hiring plans next year were impacted by AI and what AI can do for some of our workflows. So
Wow.
I think it opens up opportunities for us to hire in other areas that AI maybe doesn't impact as much, if that makes any sense. So like, let's say you've got a company budget, right? And you were spending a bunch of money over here on something super duper manual, and you would love to hire a really high level executive over here, but you can't afford it because of this. All of a sudden, those funds have shifted, and now I think you're just going to get a lot higher level people that maybe have experience or super smart. Like you're gonna find companies filled with that. And so when I'm hiring, to your point, I'm going to hire people who can show that they have AI, that they have an AI focus, that they are trained on. Like, we will test to see, how do you use it? We will test and say, what workflows have you built, things like that. And so I think that that if I was giving advice to anybody looking for jobs or anything like that, I would say you have to start using it. Because I don't know if you've read the news, but it's funny. We talk about all the money being spent in AI and all the data centers and things like that. And if you really dig into it, people at work aren't using it for whatever reason. They're not. It could be from the top down. It could be from they're fearful of it. We also have to remember humans hate change. We don't like it. You go into a place, you say, hey, I'm going to pay you the same amount of money. I'm going to reduce your job by 50% by implementing these new tools. And people will say, no, thanks. I don't want that. So that is what we're up against right now. So we're at this point where we're spending a ton of money on data centers and AI, and then we have humans who have not yet adopted it. You've got excited guys like me who love using it, and you guys using it, but I'd say the vast majority of people are sort of not falling behind, but just not implementing it. And I think as a bank, from a strategy perspective, I see opportunity there, because if I can sort of, I don't want to say force, but entice my people to use it, that's a competitive advantage against another bank who's not using it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why it's still such a big topic at every major conference you go to, is because people want to know about it that aren't using it. For the people that are using it, if you attend those sessions, a lot of it seems very beginner base level, an introduction to it, but the room is filled. Everyone wants to engage in it. They're just, like you said, it is a lot of people are fearful, and I completely understand why, just because it is a big leap. It's a big change. It's a big shakeup.
They don't know where to begin either. They don't know what the rules are. That's key too. I'll let you jump in here, but they don't know what the rules are because people at the top aren't telling them what the rules are. So I'll go back to our bank. They said Copilot for everybody, right? So now we know this is the tool we're allowed to use. We're allowed to, it doesn't train the models, supposedly. We can upload information into it. It has enterprise grade security. So we feel comfortable, and my team and the other people feel comfortable using it, that they're not going to, quote, get in trouble or screw something up. So I do think some of these companies, the leadership has to say, this is the tool we're using. We're buying the enterprise version, or we're not making them use their own personal chat GPT.
Right.
If that makes any sense, like implement something at the organization, see how it goes.
Yeah. No, and circle back, Ryan, I think multiple questions ago, I think you had said, identify a workflow that you do every day and just kind of see, hey, can AI actually help me, benefit me, and see where that kind of goes. I think that's the biggest way to kind of adopt AI personally in your day-to-day is really just, what can AI do for you in your day-to-day? I mean, just figure it out and see, tweak it, test it. I think curiosity really, gives you that room to explore and figure out exactly how AI can be implemented in your day-to-day. And so I just want to definitely emphasize that, because in my career for sure, where I've gotten the most benefit out of anything really is just being curious, whether it's researching something different, a new tool, a new workflow. I mean, when you see the benefit and kind of what it can do, I mean, it is something you want to implement, right? 'Cause someone else will. That's the biggest thing.
That's the thing. Yeah. So you touch base on trends. I definitely want to cover that as well. Being the position you're in. Also, you were so close to factoring in ABL for so long. What, besides AI, what other trends, are there any other trends that you're seeing that you think will kind of dictate or influence the industry in the next 12 to 18 months? Like, what are we looking at in 2026? Growth, suppression, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I always skip these sessions at the conference.
Next question.
The views from the top, because it's just guessing. It's all guessing.
Yeah.
So I went into this year thinking we're going to do a lot more factoring than we've done. I went into this year thinking it's going to be difficult for us to book new business, just given the headwinds of tariffs and things like that. And we grew 4 times what I thought we would do. So it really is hard to assess. I do think from a banking perspective and a regulatory perspective, things are easing a little bit for folks like us. So we're able to do things that maybe we weren't able to do in the past. I think having had a private finance company and now being at a bank, I do think it's going to be difficult. I think being a smaller private finance company is difficult. I'll just admit that. And I'm sure everyone would agree with that. It doesn't mean it's going away. I do think it's difficult. One way to compete, though, is to start implementing these tools. And all of a sudden, instead of being a small finance company, it's like you're a small finance company with a staff of 25, right? Like you got to find ways to compete with folks like banks like us who have resources to spend and put into these tools. So I do see, and on that note, I think maybe some more bank non-bank partnerships I kind of see happening. I'm seeing a little bit of that where more non-banks are coming to banks like ours with divisions like ours saying, hey, can we participate on these things together? Is there a world where we can work better together? And obviously automation and AI helps all that. It speeds things up, but I'm seeing a little bit more of that. And sorry, I don't have any better prognostications of
that's
everyone's
what we
future paychecks.
Yeah, that's what we
That's
wanted.
absolutely fine. Ryan, I guess since you've already kind of done this at your bank, implemented AI, what key piece of advice would you give to leadership, whether they're owners of factors or lenders, division leaders? What advice would you give in order for them to get comfortable implementing and using AI on the day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said it before, so I'll start there. Don't try to boil the ocean. Modernize one workflow at a time. Choose one specific part of your business that you're going to focus that on. Leave everything else alone. Because trust me, it'll infiltrate all those places once people see, oh my gosh, look how well this is working. I don't think people fear AI. They fear being left behind. And so if you can encourage your team, because like anything, any good leader leads from the top. We've all had leaders who talk out of one side of their mouth and then expect everybody else to do the opposite of what they're doing, right? It never works. I've seen it all the time. So your leaders have to be willing to adopt and start using these tools and encouraging, because I think there is this bit still of like, am I cheating on my work or am I allowed to do this? So there has to be an open and honest conversation about it. But again, it's not about replacing the lenders. It's about reducing friction. It's about reducing the time it takes so that these lenders and underwriters and everybody on the team can focus on the things that really matter. It's about elevating the things that matter. So again, open and honest conversation, I think, is probably the, as cliche as that sounds, needs to happen with your team.
Ryan, this has been such an incredible and insightful conversation. And, I will follow up with you on some questions that I have, some things that, you've probably already implemented or lessons you've probably learned. I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners are very curious as well with what's going on, at Climate First Bank and what you're working on. So for all of us that are interested in following along with your journey, how can we keep up with what's going on? What's the best way to stay in contact or stay informed with you and Climate First Bank?
Sure. Yeah. ClimateFirstBank.com. You can head to LinkedIn, find me there. It's probably the easiest way. I was going to give my email, but it's so long that it'll take forever. Ryan.Jaskiewicz at ClimateFirstBank.com. Maybe you guys can include it in the show links. Happy to talk to anybody. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a blowhard, so I love talking about this stuff. I yap all day long, my daughter says. So happy to help out wherever I can with whatever insight I can. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just an early adopter who enjoys this stuff. And I think it can really, really do some great things in our industry, specifically a very small niche industry that has headwinds all over the place. And maybe this is a way to create a tailwind.
Yeah. Well, it was incredible sitting down with you and getting to pick your brain a little bit about hearing, what makes your group and the way that you guys are approaching AI a little bit different than maybe the masses. So thank you so much for joining us. Eddie,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining as well.
Guys.
Yeah. You will see him back again soon. I promise.
Good job, Eddie. And hey, don't wait till 1 million views.
I had to keep the viewers and listeners waiting and sticking around for something. They were getting sick of me, so I was about to lose them, so we had to bring in Eddie to save the show. But
there we go.
To our viewers and listeners at home, thank you guys so much for growing the channel, allowing us to be able to sit down and have conversations like this. Remember to stay informed, stay inspired, and stay on course to growing your financial platform. Until next time, in focus with Haversine Funding.